This is my second video on obscure expanded universe concepts. Now the first one of these I focused on obscure expanded universe events, characters, species, etc. Now while part 3 has been compiled and will continue to be about topics like that, I decided that part 2 would be about obscure out-of-universe stories. So stories that not a lot of people have heard about. Let's jump right into it, shall we? So the first obscure EU story I have is The Adventures of Lanoree Brock, Jedi Ranger, which was a short story written by Tim Levin and published in 2013 on, get this, his Kindle Daily blog post, which was through Amazon. This short story fits in between chapters 2 and 3 of Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void. Though on my chronological EU list, I would recommend you just read it before the novel. It is 11-ish paragraphs long, so it's super short, but it's a piece of EU media nonetheless. The reason this is super obscure and super fun and cool is because it takes it was published on Amazon on a Kindle Daily blog post. That's not where we get EU stories. We get it in Insider, Hyperspace, StarWars.com. To get an expanded universe story on a blog post is just really unique and cool. Secondly, I have the Star Wars Mythos, which were a series of statues, releases collectibles from the website Sideshow that were available from January to October of 2013. The statues were available from the website, and the specific statues of EU interest were ones depicting Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Maul, Boba Fett, and a Gamorrean executioner. Under the listing for each of the statues to be purchased, there were several paragraphs of new prose fiction set in the EU. The stories include Ben Kenobi Desert Nomad, which details Obi-Wan's exile on Tatooine. It mentions that he's made contact with Qui-Gon's Force Ghost, so that means it has to be after the Last of the Jedi book series. And another reason why it's after Kenobi, Last of the Jedi, and obviously Lone Wolf, other than the Qui-Gon connection, is Luke is mentioned to be a boy in it, not a baby, so clearly quite a bit of time has passed, so that's why it's to the later end of those in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope Obi-Wan stories. So that's Ben Kenobi Desert Nomad. The next story is Boba Fett Bounty number 239. This one details Boba Fett attempting to grab a mysterious bounty and get past some Trandoshan twins and IG assassin droids his target has employed in his target's service as bodyguards. The ending is left open and vague, not revealing what happens. But this could honestly fit practically anywhere between Revenge of the Sith and Empire Strikes Back. The third story is Darth Maul Dark Disciple, and in Darth Maul Dark Disciple, it shows Darth Maul's angered mental state. It doesn't show any actions. There's no events that actually take place. It's just talking about how Maul's mind works. What makes Maul tick at this time. It's an insight into his mind and can be placed anywhere between his training by Sidious and his first mission. It mentions the torture that he has faced and the anger he feels. The fourth story is the most interesting in regards to its importance in the EU. It is titled The Life of Longo Two Guns and depicts Longo, the titular character, being executed by Lomrock, a Gamorrean guard employed by Jabba. This is the longest story, in terms of paragraphs, and is noteworthy because the character of Longo Two Guns first appeared in the Bounty Hunter video game. And this tiny, minuscule, and forgotten couple paragraphs details the end to the character. Lomrock himself was a character who had a EU backstory in the content of some StarWars.com informational articles released in 2013, which furthered what we saw of the character from the short story. Super interesting indeed. What a great EU connection. I can't believe this tiny tale wrapped up an EU loose end. Just crazy and awesome. For the third topic, we have two Star Wars video games that no one remembers, yet have story to them and everything. I guarantee you have not heard of this Star Wars Expanded Universe video game. It goes on a console that may be forgotten as well. The Didj console was a console released by Leapfrog, a children's educational tech company, on their Nintendo DS competitor, the Didj. The Didj was a competitor to the Nintendo DS. Released in 2008, the first game was simply called Star Wars The Clone Wars, but instead of adapting an episode from the show, it is a completely new EU adventure. Cutscenes further the story, really adding panels of new EU content to the game. It is a 2D scroller style video game, and you can play as Obi-Wan or Anakin. The game involves Obi-Wan and Anakin going to Kashyyyk early during the Clone Wars to separatist bases in search for the Ultra Droideka, a giant and indestructible droideka. By the end of the game, you have visited several planets in the quest with Anakin and Obi-Wan. There's even a space battle level, which reminds me of Exerion or Galaga, old 80s games. By the end of the game, Obi-Wan successfully destroys the Ultra Droideka. You even get to fight Asajj Ventress and General Grievous during the game. But all the villains get away, with the exception of the Droideka. There are 4 locations to clear, with 4 levels on each one of those locations. The other game is Jedi Trials, which involves you, an unnamed Padawan, accompanying Anakin to Tatooine, which he is not happy about, during the Clone Wars. You are there to investigate a raid on the planet, and in the process they learn that Dooku has obtained a piece of dangerous artifact called the Sith Nova Holocron. There are 3 pieces spread around the galaxy, which he and his minions are hunting down. This game is in 3D graphics and is a third-person game. You have a lightsaber as a weapon, and you can do Force Pull and Force Push as well. After that mission to Tatooine with Anakin, you accompany Aayla Secura to Christophsis and stop Ventress from getting that piece that is on Christophsis. However, another piece is on Rhodia, and you and Kit Fisto stop Grievous from getting the piece there. However, Dooku travels to Bepur, a volcanic planet first seen in the Clone Wars Republic Heroes video game, a cool EU connection, and you and Yoda have to go stop Dooku from harnessing the crystal's energy, as on the volcanic rock, one piece is just as powerful as all 3 together. The Padawan and Yoda stop Dooku and recover the holocron, though he gets away. The unnamed Padawan character is then promoted to the rank of Jedi Knight. So an interesting story and mission with tons of great cutscenes that advance the story. For such a small game that no one knows about, there's a lot of EU connections there and everything. I own the games on a Didj that is a specifically marked Star Wars console. The console itself has Star Wars designs all over it. Posting gameplay is tricky, due to it not being able to plug into a computer and having no screen recording feature, but I am working on it. Because I would say go out and buy it for yourself, but it's sort of expensive now. But it is a true piece of EU that more people need to be made aware of. Another obscure piece of EU, this being the 4th one, is the short story Hoth and the Greater Javin, which was a short story published on StarWars.com in March 25th of 2004. It was written by Craig R. Carey, Jason Fry, and Daniel Wallace. It is not even a whole web page long. The story details Solomal, a Lutrillian scout for hire, seen in the Mos Eisley Cantina from A New Hope, and he's transporting a Nothoan named Kova to a stronghold in the Greater Javin sector under Imperial threat. Now, not only is there a connection to A New Hope with Solomal, the character, because the Nothoians are another interesting EU connection. They're a bald, gold-skinned species and were first mentioned in Han Solo's Revenge by Brian Daley, though the only image of them comes from the Runaway Ride, which was from the Clone Wars UK magazine. This is such a cool connection that you just know Jason Fry and Daniel Wallace cooked up. They could have said the passenger was a simple Wookiee, or a species from the movies that people would recognize, but instead, it was a super deep lore reference from the EU, for nerd lore junkies like you and me. Amazing. What a great minuscule EU piece. Though timeline-wise this could probably go anywhere from a few years before A New Hope up to Return of the Jedi. Timeline placement for this story seems pretty ambiguous to me. The next 2 stories are super short paragraph stories from the Star Wars Galaxy MMO website before it was shut down. They were released in 2008 for Move It or Lose It, and 2009 for Smoke 'em Out. They were basically like super short versions of the SWTOR MMO website short story tie-ins. I never got to play Galaxies, so I'm not sure what the tie-ins are, but I presume the short stories include characters from the game. The first story, Move It or Lose It, details Imperial Colonel Bradick Eckirk, an Imperial and an Imperial Admiral, drawing up plans for demolishing abandoned buildings throughout the galaxy. Vader is mentioned too, so it has to be set pre-Return of the Jedi, because he's mentioned as being alive. However, it could really go anywhere. Sort of inconsequential, but sort of interesting too. Apparently the Imperials demolished buildings for some reason. Maybe the game explained. I don't know. The second short story, Smoke 'Em Out, included Bradick Eckirk again, but also included characters named Brady, Hoot, and T. Morrow, I suppose from the game. Inconsequential again? Yeah, but cool that we have it, absolutely. Us EU fans care about every single tiny morsel of EU, now that we don't have any more of it. Now every scrap counts, every little droplet. We just lap it up, gratefully. Next is a Dark Horse comic strip that appeared on the back of Applejack cereal boxes in 1995. Long have I prowled the internet in search of someone selling such a box, but alas, I found nothing, though the strip is everywhere on the internet. It is literally 4 panels long, and details 3PO and R2 in Mos Eisley waiting for Luke. They are there to acquire parts for the Landspeeder's maintenance, so I assume this short story takes place during A New Hope, though I guess theoretically it could have been during a return trip, though I think that may be unlikely. It's awesome this extra bit of EU exists. The Dark Horse logo was on the cereal box and everything. Super cool. Not only that, but we have another previously unknown and never published piece of EU, very much related to this strip on the back of the cereal box. It is an alternate story that would have gone on the back of the Applejack cereal box. It is a very rough sketch and was obviously never completed, but this small comic panel also does not break canon, so it can remain EU. Would have been cool if both these comic panels and the other one both made it onto cereal boxes, and not just the one. Ryder Wyndham was nice enough to share it with Matt Wilkins and Christopher Nelson, those in the know EU inner circle guys, who communicate with all the authors, you know. They know what's going on. And now it is on the expandeduniverse.com. I actually prefer the short comic for cereal box than the one we got. The story is better, and the aliens have a really cool, unique design. So I prefer what we shall call Comic B, the one that didn't get completed, stayed a rough sketch, and never got on the cereal box. That one was much better than the one that we actually got on the cereal box, in my opinion. But new EU, nonetheless, even if the art is uncompleted. Number 7 on this list is a 2012 Twitter social media story, which is titled Sanjay Rosh's Royal Proclamation. It is a super obscure in-universe document story. It is written as a royal proclamation, official document type, in the vein of like the Declaration of Independence, sort of official governmental related document. Which is really cool that we got this. The king's signature is in Arabish too, a nice touch. It was released 2 days before the TCW episode, The Soft War. It's quite obscure and really cool to have. To get an EU story out of the Clone Wars Twitter account? Cool. Number 8 is Watch Out for the Wookiee. This was released in 2013 as a 28-page picture book accompanying the Play School Millennium Falcon toy set. The Play School toys are highly stylized toys for children, in the vein of sort of like the stylization that what's it called, of like old 80s toys, like Fisher Price toys. It's got a very stylized look to these toys, and this picture book that it came with included an original story showing the Falcon, Han, and Chewie on an original adventure. A truly unique piece of EU for sure. The pictures in the story are even stylized like the Play School toy design, making this quite an interesting piece of EU. It involves Han and Chewie attempting to evade Imperials on Tatooine. Now, what I think is really cool about this is they could have gone for any old story in this picture book. They could have adapted parts of the movies. You know, they could have showed events from the movies as a picture book, but instead they told an original story, which gets 3 thumbs up from me. The the ninth and final piece of obscure EU to look at on this part 2, but don't worry, there will be a part 3, is MyComyc, which was a 16-issue Spanish comic series, which included comic strips from Inspector Gadget, the Pink Panther, and other popular 80s era cartoons. Included in these were comic strips based on the Droids and Ewoks 1980s cartoon shows. Luckily, thanks to Joe Bongiorno, we got EU translations that are now freely available online on StarWarsTimeline.net and a couple other places as well. These are super awesome, and they really fit the vibe and tone of the Ewoks and Droids cartoons and the Marvel officially licensed Ewoks and Droids comics that we got as well. These are truly an awesome piece of EU. Each comic strip is only like 2 or 3 pages long, so you're not getting complex stories, but you're getting cool new stories nonetheless, with lots of elements from the cartoon further expanded. So that's my list. Do you guys have any other obscure expanded universe stories that I neglected to mention that I didn't talk about? Let me know what those are, because there's quite a lot of obscure ones, so I'm just trying to shine a spotlight on some of the less well-known ones. But this might not be as popular as the first one. The first one got 105 views, which for me, that's big views currently. But, I decided to take a stab in the dark and try something different for part 2. So if it's not as well received as part 1, let me know. Did you prefer part 1 where I went over events, characters, species that are obscure, or did you prefer part 2 where I talked about out-of-universe documents? Regardless of how this is received, you can be rest assured that a part 3 in the vein of the first part is coming. I am working on it, so stay tuned for that one.